for mid-20s in the southeast. High teens, low 20s elsewhere, and as we go into Saturday night, it looks like the showers will mostly ease, but still a few lingering across parts of Wales, as well as central and northern Scotland. Away from the showers, again, temperatures in some sheltered spots dipping into the single figures. So a fresh start on Sunday, but a bright start for many. Plenty of sunny spells for central and eastern, as well as northern parts of the country. The cloud will build towards the west and southwest, and we'll see some persistent rain pushing into North Wales, the North Midlands, as well as Cornwall later in the day. That rain then spreads across the country on Monday, turning to showers later.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, you're watching and listening to GB News. This is Saturday morning with Esther and Phil coming up on the show today.
We'll be talking about mandatory mask wearing after a paper from the Tony Blair Institute called for this.
We will also be discussing a damning report into Liverpool Council, cost of living and Tinder as the dating app approaches its 10th birthday.
All of that plus plenty more after your latest headlines with Tatiana.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. More travel disruption is expected on mainline trains today as union members from 18 train companies walk out. Only 20% of the UK rail network is said to be running, with some parts of the country having no trains running at all. Some train services will also be affected on Sunday by the aftermath of today's strike action. Well, yesterday saw little to no services running on the London Tube, while most buses across west and southwest of the capital were cancelled. P&O Ferries will not face criminal proceedings over its handling in firing almost 800 workers earlier this year, according to the Insolvency Service. The firm sparked backlash after it sacked staff without notice in March, replacing them with agency workers. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng asked the Insolvency Service to carry out an urgent inquiry into whether the law had been broken. There are no outstanding criminal proceedings, but a civil investigation is ongoing. Former Levelling Up Minister Michael Gove has endorsed Rishi Sunak to be the next Conservative leader. While writing in The Times, he accused Foreign Secretary Liz Truss of taking a holiday from reality over her plans to cut tax to ease the rising cost of living. The former Cabinet Minister also said he won't be returning to frontline politics. Meanwhile, the two candidates vying to be Conservative leader have outlined their plans for policing if they were to become the next Prime Minister. Well, speaking at the GB News hustings in Manchester last night, Rishi Sunak called for the Justice Secretary to be put in charge of parole boards to prevent political correctness from affecting sentencing decisions. He also gave his support for stop and search powers to tackle knife crime. Meanwhile, Liz Truss said officers should be more focused on tackling crime on the streets rather than on social media.
We do need to make sure our police are policing the streets rather than policing Twitter and focusing on the right crimes the public are concerned about. See, what I would do is have league tables that compare police forces and how they are performing so they can really be held to account by the public.
Stop and search is the thing that we know makes an enormous difference. It's actually the powers that we are trialling in other areas in the country that allow the police to stop and search previously convicted knife criminals.
A 23-year-old man has been charged with the abduction and sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl in Greater Manchester. Lewis Jones has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of abduction. He's been remanded in custody and will appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court later today. The victim has since been safely reunited with her family. Weeks of drought in Europe have led to lower than normal water levels in rivers and lakes, but it's also unveiled treasures that have remained hidden for years. Well, in Spain, water levels have reached so low that it's revealed a prehistoric stone circle dubbed the Spanish Stonehenge. It's been hidden since the 1960s as the area was turned into a reservoir. Meanwhile, in Serbia, the river Danube has fallen to one of its lowest levels in almost a century and exposes the hulks of more than 20 German warships that were sunk during the Second World War. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning with me, Esther, and him, Philip, coming up on today's show.
Should ministers introduce mandatory face masks again on public transport this winter? Tony Blair's think tank has warned if we don't, the NHS will be overwhelmed.
We'll be discussing too the cost of living after Labour called for MPs to return to Parliament early to deal with the crisis.
And as the dating app Tinder approaches its 10th birthday, we will be joined by one of the app's most swiped men to discuss the best ways to find love in the 21st century.
And as ever, we want to hear from you today. So if you want to get involved in the show, please email us at gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Before all of that, though, we're delighted to be joined in the studio by London Assembly member Sean Bailey. Sean, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Absolute pleasure.
And dealing with the aftermath of the tube strike. So now, you this week have been writing about knife crime in the capital.
I wrote about knife crime in the capital because really it's about the growing feeling that on the streets of London you can do as you please. We had an elderly man, 87 years old, murdered in his mobility scooter. Just such a shocking crime. But it just shows you, again, this is in broad daylight, it shows you the level of bravery that criminals have in London, and I think it's time that we did something about it. I think it's long overdue. And the other incident that pushed me as well is the fact that on Oxford Street, we had a mob just descend on Oxford Street, loot shops, fight with the police, and then disperse and go their merry way. These things are close to a huge amount of public disorder. We need to tackle them now. That means backing the police and asking them to do a better job.
Now, in the Daily Telegraph today, it's a report that Sadiq Khan blames the spate of London murders on the cost of living crisis and the hot weather. What seems bizarre to me, but what do you make of that?
Look, it's par for the course for Sadiq Khan. Why he's been such a terrible mayor, he'll never take responsibility for anything. If he doesn't think that there's things that can be done to fix crime, then we're all in trouble. And not just in London, by the way. The crime in London is so bad now, we're exporting it across the country with county lines or whatever. So the whole country has a stake in this being solved. And look, he's blamed it on parents, he's blamed it on Twitter, he's now blamed it on the weather and cost of living crisis. The thing I know that he doesn't know, most poor people have absolutely nothing to do with crime. They spend all their time trying to make ends meet, not going out committing crimes. This is just to cover the fact that for 6 years now, he hasn't managed the police properly, and we're seeing the results of that.
What do you think is the solution to the knife crime in London?
There's a number of things. Firstly, we need to go back to the police and say, you need to be able to do stop and search properly and regularly. We need to stop all people all of the time. We need knife arches. We need wands so that the police can say to people in a community, look, we're looking for weapons. We're not looking for your drugs. We're not looking to harass. We're looking for weapons. Everybody would get behind that and wand people down and get these weapons off the street. There's technology out there in the world, which means you can scan large numbers of people to see what they have in their pockets. And I think that's justified when the level of murder in London is so high. These are just 2 steps you could take. But the really important step is to back the police. The mayor, since before he was elected, has always talked down stop and search. It's put the police in a tricky area, and now your rank and file officer doesn't know if they're coming or going, so they just don't do it.
You know, and for me, you know, reading the papers, walking the streets, etc., you know, you think there's come a tipping point. You then think there is lawlessness rather than the law. All of a sudden, you think, I don't feel safe anymore. I don't feel he's got a grip on what's going on. And I do believe you're going to have to come back strong. You're going to have to come back with some serious discipline. And you're right, you're going to have to back the police and take serious measures now, because I think you've let it slip too far.
I couldn't agree more. And let's be clear, the police are not perfect. They have lots to do. The Met's in special measures, which I believe the mayor could have done something about to prevent. And remember, he's been the mayor for 6 years. They're not perfect, but they are trying. But they've got one hand tied behind their back because they're not being protected by their political masters. Anything that happens, Sadiq Khan throws the police to the wolves. Instead of standing up and saying, I'm here for you when you do the right thing, I'm here for you when you do the wrong thing, but I will correct you. And look how he treated Cressida Dick, for instance. He commentated from the sidelines, and then when it suited him politically, he threw her to the wolves.
Yeah, and a strategic mistake as well. They didn't know who they were going to have, so they were rudderless, leaderless for a long period of time, so a mistake.
A real mistake as well, and he should have seen that coming. And what's ironic is he'll say that about the country we're rudderless, but he won't say that about something that he's done himself. The problem we have in London, though, there is an idea that the mayor is not taking responsibility for policing. There's an idea that you can do as you please on the streets of London, and it's almost like the mayor's been calling for civil unrest, keep blaming it on other things. If we go too far with that, we could go beyond the point of no return, and that will be down to him.
Now, I've got another London story that I saw this week, Sean, which I'd be interested to know your view on this. I hate political correctness. For many years in Parliament, I was the parliamentary spokesman for the campaign against political correctness. So I'm always on the lookout for these things. Barts Health NHS Trust have been advertising for a director of operations. And in the advert, it says, and I'm quoting now exactly what was in the advert, we are particularly interested in candidates who identify as female and or are from a black, Asian or minority ethnic background to ensure our organisation is representative of our local communities. Now, you get all that sort of, most of that rubbish in most of these adverts, but the bit that particularly struck me in this, you know, I hate all this positive action and positive discrimination. Just recruit the best person, for goodness sake. But the bit I've found, I've never seen this before, candidates who identify as female. So they're not even asking for women, which is what you often get in these job adverts. So I could apply for this job if I just went along and ticked a box saying, I identify as a female.
Well, if they gave me as a reference, I'd say you don't. I'd say that was like, I identify. I am a woman.
What on earth is all of this? What do you make of all this kind of stuff?
I think there's 2 real tracks here. Firstly, these organisations are afraid of being cancelled. They're afraid of being criticised. And what they've done is add to that by continue pumping out this nonsense. And the other thing, it's actually ridiculous and dangerous. I remember when Bruce Jenner won Woman of the Year, and I was reading it on the train, and a woman said to me, hold on, he's been a woman for 10 months. I've been a woman for 40 years. How is he better at it than I am? You know, and it's that sort of absurdity, isn't it? And we should be able to say to people, your gender, your sexuality, your ethnic background doesn't matter. do you have the credentials, particularly in such an important job? Now, if you want to help people from, say, the black community or women, you need to do it further downstream. You need to support people, give them access to your network, give them training. But what you don't do is at the last hurdle, put them in as a token. Because what happens is, if you're in a position and people think you're there because you're a woman, because you identify as a woman, because you're black or because you're gay, they will never, ever respect you and you'll never get the job done.
It's more divisive than anything.
Yeah,
it's exactly what it's doing.
What was the story?
Well, my story of the week had to be the FBI raiding Trump's Mar-a-Lago home, wasn't it? I mean, I thought this really is going to be the start of his audacious return to the White House. I felt he's going to be like Rocky the boxer, you know, he's going to come from behind and give the political establishment a bloody nose. And no Attorney General has ever before granted, you know, a raid of a former president's house. And I thought, if this was a political act by the Democratic establishment to see him off, it's had the absolute reverse, and he's actually soared in his popularity. And if he went now and they had the presidential election, I would do better than when he actually won. So I thought this actually is just, as I said, made his rating soar. And, you know, he's not to be underestimated. Any other politician probably would have been seen off if they had been investigated under the Espionage Act, but not him. This is his way back in, and it's absolutely motivated his base to support him, and that's what you need, your base, as it were, to come out.
I tell you the problem here is, so here's what the ordinary man or woman in America sees. They see the current president and his retinue, the people around him, trying to use the law to determine their political outcomes, and they don't like that. And it reminds me of British people. British people are lovely until you tell them what to do. They actually will make up our own minds here. And you've seen that in the States now. And what they've done is made it really personal. But the important political point is, when Trump was at his most prominent, he kept talking about fake news. This plays into that narrative. So now if you're a Trump supporter, not only do you believe him, you have evidence for that. And I actually think the Democrats need to be very careful. It goes for politics across the world, even here, to try to use the law to gain a political outcome is a very slippery slope, and it looks like the American public are wise to that. I hope we are too.
What added to the farce and the drama was, can you imagine this? Trump is 1,000 miles away in Trump Towers in New York, and they're all watching this raid on his CCTV from a meeting he had there. And then obviously he loves the social media. He's sort of pumping out, yes, the raid is true. Oh my goodness, they've damaged my safe. You know, all these sort of juicy tidbits. So, I mean, he was loving it and doing what he does best, getting attention.
He turned it into reality TV. If you're a producer, you couldn't have come up with this. You couldn't have come up with this.
He defies political gravity, doesn't he, Donald Trump? You know, anything that would finish everyone else off. And, of course, the thing that they're doing, which is very effective, is the Republicans are saying, well, you know, this is what you'd expect in a tin pot dictatorship, where you arrest your political opponents, you know. And the American people are saying, yeah, that sounds right to me. Yeah, this is, you know, it's amazing.
Sean, you will be back with us at 11 o'clock to look at the day's papers. This was what happened in the week, so thanks very much and thanks for getting here. I know you had to fight your way here because of the train and tube strikes. So a report into Liverpool Council has identified systematic whole council weaknesses and highlighted a culture where people don't feel accountable for managing public money.
The damning report also said the governance requires significant improvement, adding that the lack of effective risk management had threatened the safety of services.
Well, joining us now is Mark Bouchard, a Liverpool business owner and formerly of the Merseyside Partnership, responsible for inward investment into Merseyside. So, a damning report, Mark. How did you read it?
Well, it doesn't make good reading, does it, Esther, at all? We've been knowed about this for about a year, and we've been conscious about the fact that there's been issues with property regeneration and highways. But now the commissioners have come in and they've said that they want to impose a commission around finance as well, and recruitment and governance. And it really undermines the credibility of the city for outsiders. And when you're looking to develop businesses like I do, and you're looking to hopefully help businesses to land within the city, it creates a really bad image, and something's got to be done.
So are we going back to the bad old days of Derek Hatton and Militant?
I don't know. I don't think it's gone to that point. I think Liverpool has come on in strides, and obviously coming from the city yourself, you're aware of some of the real progress that's been made infrastructure-wise. It's been made within the business community, and for the first time in a generation, I'm seeing young entrepreneurs starting business. I'm working with a lot of them, and there is a confidence in that. Now, let's get it in perspective. We are well behind our neighbours Manchester, who have a lot of the professional services, engineering, high-tech jobs. We need more of them. But I am seeing progress, and it isn't the bad old days. And hopefully the intervention from Whitehall will actually make a difference, and we can get back to where we need to be.
Mark, you say it's not the bad old days of Militant, but I've been reading through this report, and it estimates that Liverpool City Council by 25-26 year will have a gap in its funding of £98 million. The report says the process and culture for rigorous, transparent decision-making in Liverpool City Council are not in place. It says the council is not meeting its statutory duty to provide best value. And it says property debt levels increased to £10.2 million last year, and it is not clear whether there is a strategy in place to recover this debt or even who is responsible for debt collection. I mean, it sounds to me like an absolute basket case reading through this report.
It doesn't read well, does it at all, that, Philip? You're absolutely right. It comes across as a basket case. And, we've got to put a stop on it now, because if we don't, then it's going to get even worse, and we are going to end up with a completely bankrupt city. And what's that going to do to us as a city? It's going to leave us well behind. The government has set out a blueprint for the Northern Powerhouse, and Liverpool is a key component of that. It needs to get its act together, and they are making the right direction. They are putting the commissions in. Hopefully that will make the difference. But I should say that in all of this, there are good people there. There are good people in the city who are being shortchanged, but there are good people within the council as well who feel as though that their governance is not doing justice to their efforts. And, yes, we have got a big shortfall. We have to make that up, and there have to be some hard decisions. But to do that, we need investment. And to do that, we need credibility.
Mark, I have to say, as it's my home city, it makes my heart, it really breaks my heart, this. And you're obviously following it in the Liverpool Echo, what's going on. So who is to blame then? Is it the mayor? Is it the CEO who left? Is it the councillors? I mean, how are you going to get out of this mess? But who is to blame?
I think when you look at blame, it goes back quite a while as well. I think you've got a governance system where there is, obviously, as we know, there isn't a great deal of opposition in the city and accountability, and that's been prevalent for a good number of years now. But that doesn't mean all things are bad. Some of the councillors there are incredibly good, but many of them have it's a dereliction of duty. But you look at the internals of the council now. Since the commissioners have come in, there have been some very high-level departures, not least the chief executive, the director of regeneration, and the finance directors, including the leader, the cabinet member for finance as well, on the back of a particularly disastrous not paying of the electricity bill. As simple as that, in some ways. So yes, there is blame across the board. And you've got to look at it as, we are as a city. We've got to take a collective responsibility as individuals that we get the right people in and we get the right people working with us.
Mark Bouchard, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
It breaks my heart. It is a magnificent city. It has got magnificent people who are there. We just always say, the civil leadership doesn't do it justice. And I wonder, is it because it is really a city with just a single political party running it? I mean, I have to say, not that it helped me, and I don't think it did me any favours, and it might have been misinterpreted. I wanted to stand in that area from an opposite party just to give that challenge and a bit more balance, because I do think it's a magnificent place.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got no opposition, it doesn't help with scrutiny and holding people to account. Anyway, coming up after the break, we're joined in the studio by the author of a book looking at our love affair with feelings and the current mental health crisis in the UK. Don't go away.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the show. It's 10:23. It's time now to talk about mental health and a book called Sweet Distress, How Our Love Affair with Feelings Has Fueled the Current Mental Health Crisis.
The author, Gillian Bridge, delves into a range of problems most frequently cited as sources of mental distress, including body image, social media, academic pressures, and explores how these issues have led to seemingly insurmountable emotional problems for many in society.
Well, we're delighted to say that Gillian joins us now. So, Gillian, what was the trigger point for you to write this book?
Well, it comes on the back of another one called The Significance Delusion, which I think, with the best will in the world, you wouldn't say was a light read. So I wanted to get the message out and make it more specific and more current. And I think the whole business of adolescent mental health over the last few years has really grabbed the headlines. So I'm using a lot of the theories that I developed over years and years and years, working with different groups, you know, teaching and working in prisons and working with people with brain damage and autism and so on. And the one common feature that I saw in problematic thinking, behaviour and emotions was a complete obsession with the self and how the self was reacting to life and feeling about life. So I started to sort of explore more and more the sort of science that could support what I thought I was seeing, left, right and centre. And there's just so much evidence that seems to say that what we are currently doing is not, well, I think we all know it's not working because we're seeing problems proliferating. And even if it comes down to the COVID pandemic, which has obviously caused a lot of problems, there are some young people who've come out of that situation far better than others. Mm-hmm. And it's trying to find the common factors in resilience, I think.
Yeah, when you say it's not working, you know, the figures there about teenagers on antidepressants. Yes. So we're giving people drugs now for antidepressants, and it said drugs doled out to 13 to 19-year-olds increased by 25% between 2016 and 2020. That can't be the way forward. So where do we start to reverse what's going on?
Yes, it's always difficult once you're partway down a route, isn't it, to sort of turn back. You can't go back to the beginning of the route. But I think we need to be doing two things. One is we need to be looking at the mental health of women who are going to give birth and of men as well, because there are all kinds of epigenetic factors in things like anxiety. And that is one of the greatest predictors of ongoing problems through life. So if you've got an anxious person who then goes on to have children, that anxiety is going to be passed down the line. And Sussex University is doing a lot of work on that, and you can actually train people out of anxious behaviours, for example, and you can start to reset the brain. But, you know, as Hamlet said, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So I think part of the way of dealing with the young people who are currently presenting with problems is to use language and self-narrative to challenge their idea that everything is as bad as they think it is. Narratisation has been shown to boost mental health, to protect against PTSD, all kinds of things that, you know, we are now suffering from en masse. So I think we can do some practical things in the here and now. We can encourage people to take part in, for boys, team sports work terribly well. Less well for girls, apparently. But exercise in general, of course, you know, everyone's saying this, exercise, diet, not spending too much time on social media, never smoking, never using drugs. These are all sort of givens for everybody in improving mental health.
When did all this change? Because I always thought Britain was renowned for its stiff upper lip. So when did that reputation end?
I think it's been coming on a while, hasn't it? And obviously the Princess Diana thing was, you know, a bit of a turning point for a lot of people.
Is that when you say Princess Diana, you mean the
funeral?
The funeral?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, the outpouring of emotion.
Funnily enough, that's when I noticed it changing. When sort of all these people were lining the streets in floods of tears who'd never met her.
They'd never met her.
And I found that quite strange, personally.
Yes.
Do you think that's when that signalled the sort of shift from
well, it was
stiff upper lip to...
Yeah, I think if that had happened perhaps 10 or 15 years earlier, maybe the majority of people wouldn't have reacted like that. So I think there's an ongoing thing.
So what is it? Is it a self-obsession? I want to outdo you. I feel more, I don't know, a pain than you do.
Yes.
And I want to show you it. And is that down to social media? Because you can show it. Everybody can take a photo. Everybody can emote. Everybody can post something up onto it.
Oh, I think that's... And I used a phrase at the beginning of the book, which I will not repeat here. But, you know, people are getting very, you know, excited emotionally about being able to do that. And of course, the other thing that was, you know, being promoted in business as well as in education and every which way is empathy. And actually, there's something rather strange about feeling somebody else's feelings and sharing their pain and things like that. You hear less often people saying, "Oh, I'm sharing their happiness."
Is there something positive? People would say that there's a positive thing here, that actually suppressing your feelings and all the rest of it isn't good for you, and that actually showing more emotion is a positive thing. That's what. Would you subscribe to that at all?
Well, I think, you know, in the book I make the point that there's a happy medium through all of these things. And no, I don't expect everyone to want to go back, and I don't want to go back to never being able to talk about things. But I make a distinction about the ways in which you talk about things in the book. So if it's just an outpouring of emotion, that is usually just reinforcing negativity, you know, a lot of the time anyway. And so if you revise, rehearse, repeat the same, I'm so miserable, I've got so many problems, you will actually then believe that that is the case. But to talk about the things that are going on in your life in a more structured and helpful way, which involves the rational side of the brain, and that's something else which goes, you know, it's counterintuitive. People have all said, if you're more creative, you can let out your, you know, emotions, your feelings through your creativity. Well, the evidence is that suggests that the more creative people are, actually very often the more problems they have. And we know from brain damage that actually the rational left side of the brain is a more positive and optimistic side.
You've said for a long time, logic has gone for lots of things and placed with emotions and feelings and my idea on things. I think there was a curious thing that Meghan Markle said, I'm an only child. And it was like, well, you're not an only child. She said, well, I feel like an only child, therefore I am. It's my subjective view on the world. Well, you're not. That is now factually inaccurate. Inaccurate logic has done, and it's emotion. So going back to the resilience, and we'll end here, because I think this is the positive note that you're talking about. My dad would always say, draw a line, turn the page, you can't go back, so don't dwell on it. So this resilience, and I work with a lot of kids, what would you say the key things are to do?
I think we need to get them to be more curious, We need to change approaches to education so that they're looking at history in a more chronological way, so they realise where they've come from. And we're not doing that at the moment. So I think they need to get perspective to see their place in the world as being where it is rather than the only thing in the world. So we're countering solipsism, we're giving them a broader perspective, boosting their curiosity and getting them sort of navigating their thoughts as well as their outside spaces.
Gillian Bridge, thank you very much indeed. That was excellent.
And good luck with the book.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sweet distress.
Now, this week, the Tony Blair Institute published a paper titled 3 Months to Save the NHS, in which it warned that the health service is on the brink of disaster.
The Institute has called on the government to extend the COVID-19 and flu vaccine strategies, not to just over 50s this autumn, but to everyone over the age of 18. It's also called for mandatory mask wearing.
Well, joining us now is the director of the University of Oxford's Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine, Carl Hennigan. Carl, thank you so much for joining us. If you could help us unpick the Tony Blair Institute stuff, let's start on my favourite subject, which is wearing face masks. Is there any evidence at all that the compulsory wearing of face masks by the public either saves the NHS, saves lives, or makes any material difference at all?
Yeah, it's a curious sort of intervention from the Tony Blair Institute. I looked at the report and they cite two pieces of evidence, if they like, to support their position. We're going to save the whole of the NHS by everybody wearing a mask on public transport. That seems to be the case. And what they're looking at is they cite an editorial, which is an opinion about observational research, which is low quality evidence. And then second is they refer to Germany and say, well, Germany is now going to thinking of having a mask mandate, therefore we should follow Germany. And it's interesting what the German minister says. He says the evidence is indisputable. Well, when I ever meet anybody who says evidence is indisputable about an intervention, that sets off my alarm bells because they're not looking at the evidence. It becomes a belief system. I think if we look at it across the world, we've tried mask mandates. Germany tried FFP2 masks. Actually, what they do is they have not changed the course and nature of what's happened next. So I think if we're going to really think seriously about the problems in the NHS, we can't outsource it to the Tony Blair Institute, and we certainly can't say it's going to be fixed with a mask mandate on public transport.
And then, you know, this 3 months to save the NHS, not 24 hours. We've heard this one. We've now got 3 months to save the NHS. And I now think they're saying, you know, the vaccine, cold and, you know, flu and COVID for over 18s. Is that right?
So I think, look, I've been in the NHS now, it's coming up for 2.5 decades, really. And we've had this recurring problem of the crisis in winter. I remember going right back to 2000 when people were queuing out the door. And what we've never done is took a medium to long-term approach to solve this situation. The NHS seems to be the only institution I know, or the only business that doesn't embrace demand. And I am seriously worried if we send out another message, which is protect the NHS, please stay away. Now, what they're looking at in terms of the influenza is they're looking at what's happened in Australia. We've had 1 or 2 years now with this social distancing, and we've had a large break in influenza. So people are expecting that actually this winter there'll be a bit of COVID, but there'll also be a bit of influenza. But there's a recent paper just out this week that says who's most at risk with COVID right now? It's actually those that are immunosuppressed. So the problem is when you try to blanket coverage everybody, particularly those least at risk, the young people, what you do is you end up missing those people who are more at risk. So what we should be thinking about is who are the high-risk people, and let's make sure we get to those and put all our effort in there and not try and give it to the low-risk people where it's going to make no difference whatsoever. And that's always a failure when you try to enact preventive care, when you're trying to it too wide. And the problem as well is you give it to all 18-year-olds, you're going to overwhelm general practice, you won't get to be able to be seen for all those other conditions, and basically we'll be swamped with giving vaccines from now till Christmas and not focus on many of the other important issues.
Now, on that point, Carl, we've obviously seen the report this week, the really worrying report about 10,000 excess deaths since June. And many people have put that down to some of the response to the COVID pandemic. What's your reading of the reason for these high numbers of excess deaths in the in the last couple of months?
So actually, the number of excess deaths is greater than that. If you go back about 3 months, it's nearly getting towards 20,000. It's about 18,000 excess, of which about 5,000 deaths have been due to COVID in that period. So it's not COVID. The second issue is the Department of Health has come out and said, well, we think most of the rise is in those with cardiac disease and those with diabetes. And that's really concerning because many of those areas are preventable. And I think this is a number of problems. Prevention has been poor throughout the pandemic because of the restrictions. We know there's been significant number of people not coming forward. We know there's failings within our emergency services because they're not equipped to be able to get there on time. So I think this is a problem across the whole spectrum. And what's happened here is the restrictions have basically tipped the NHS over the edge. And actually now we've got a big problem of catch-up. So at the end of the day, when people come back to you and say about lockdowns and restrictions, they're risk-free. This is a message to all those people to say they are not. They come with serious consequences over the medium to long term. And that's the sort of fallout we're seeing now.
So, Carl, the last question here. Has there been any shift in the views in the scientific community about lockdown?
I think there's been more of a shift in the public than there has been in the scientific community. I think what we've seen is those people who set out the scientific positions for lockdown are having difficulty shifting their opinion because to do that, they'd have to say they were wrong. But I think what's happening is the evidence is emerging more and more and more to show how detrimental they are to society. Look at the issues like education. You were talking there about mental health and resilience. It's impacting on our health system, the economy, wide-ranging problems. So I think the public is now looking at it differently. But I think the problem here is that right now, nobody's talking up. You said about your last person said about nobody's talking up the good news that actually cases are down, hospitalizations are down, and actually nobody's talking about COVID. But soon as it goes in the opposite direction, all the usual pundits will be back, all the doom stories will be back, and then we'll end up with this significant issue going into September, October with the same stories again about we need to lock down, we need to intervene. I think this time round, though, everybody knows the economy cannot tolerate another lockdown, and neither can many of the systems like education and our health system.
Professor Carl Hennigan, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Coming up after the break, we're joined by the most swiped man on Tinder, and it's not Philip. As the dating app approaches its 10th birthday, so don't go anywhere.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, lots of you have been getting in touch already, Phil.
Lots of people very pleased with Sean Bailey, who was doing our paper review. He's getting lots of praise here. Just to give you an example, Robert said, will Sean Bailey stand for London Mayor for a second bite of the cherry? I feel he was let down by Boris for standing by him. Our new leader will. And Sue says, what a clever, amazingly in-touch commentator Sean Bailey is. He would make a fantastic Prime Minister. Such a breath of fresh air to hear such honest, real analysis. What a find for GB News. Compulsive viewing. Thank you, Sue.
Yeah, we're going to have to make sure he does.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Linda says, many young people are suffering mental health due to technology and social media. Expectations are unrealistic, which many parents are responsible for. Children are not experiencing good, healthy childhoods and are growing up too soon, so missing out on vital social development.
Keep those views coming in. Now, next month, the incredibly popular dating app Tinder will be celebrating its 10th birthday.
Tinder has led to many successful long-term relationships and bet you many unsuccessful short-term relationships and even marriages. But it's also been criticised about safety concerns and whether the people you meet are really who they say they are.
To talk about the legacy of Tinder as it approaches its birthday, we're delighted to say we're joined by one of the app's most swiped men, who now helps others find love by making various tweaks to their profiles. Welcome to the show, James Langton. Now, James, for those, I can't say I'm a Tinder expert, and that's certainly what I tell Esther anyway. But I mean, for those that don't know, being swiped means that you're one of the most popular people that people want to have a date with. So what's the secret of your success?
So, I was contacted by Tinder, and they obviously told me I was on the most right swipe list. So essentially, when people have right swiped me, if I right swipe them back, then there's a match. But I think with my profile, it was a case of, I'm a photographer as well. So it was a case of choosing the photos that were, that making direct eye contact with the camera, and I was smiling and, completing my profile. But it was quite a few years ago now. I feel a lot of a different person since then. It was 2008, 2019 that it happened. Obviously, since then I've been helping, single people with, creating the perfect profile.
Now, you say when you told your friends you were the most swiped, I think they were a little bit jealous. They went, oh, well, you're not the best looking or whatever it was. So then you must have had the ability to bring your personality across. So what do you need to do? I'm not looking for clues here, but what do you need to do if you want to draw attention to yourself on the app to get a date?
Well, the thing is with dating apps is you've got to remember that they are a social media platform. So essentially, when you think of, flicking through Facebook or Instagram and you see adverts, the ones that are the most colourful, the ones that, really draw your attention are the ones that stick out. And it's the same with dating apps. So if you have a photo where there's lots of colour in it, it's fairly, closely cropped so people can see your face. That's the best kind of thing you can do, first of all, to start getting more connections on the dating app. So improving your profile always has to be, the fundamental thing for, getting more matches.
How about like props? Would you say, oh, I'll have a dog? People love dogs. Is that what you do? Oh, look, I'm a dog, animal. Do you say, don't go down the gym, but if you're a fireman, make sure everybody knows, because everybody likes a man in uniform or a fireman. What are the tricks that you're using here?
Well, I wouldn't really say they're tricks. I actually like to think what I do is almost like CV writing. So we will, find out about somebody, for example, if they are a fireman or a chef or whatever they do for a living, what their hobbies or interests. We'll find out what they do. And 9 times out of 10, we find that people just can't represent themselves in the way that, they should be represented. They're not very good at showing the hobbies or interests that they have. So when they come to us, we will just say, look, lay it all flat on the table. What do you do? And, in your work, your free time, etc. And then from there, we can obviously build a profile that is going to get more engagement, i.e., so that, improving the photos, and then also writing a bio that's going to convert into, more matches, which obviously converts into more dates.
James, I'm getting a special request here from the people
Not for me, I might add, James.
From GB News. They want to know what you put on your bio. They'll obviously all be changing theirs pretty rapidly. So what have you got on your bio?
I mean, I'm actually not on Tinder anymore, so I don't have a bio, for me.
Don't dodge it. What did you have on your bio?
So mine was, oh God, this is going back a while now. I think it was just about, I enjoyed spending time with my family and friends. I go cycling and go to the gym, and I like traveling. And I obviously work in marketing as well, so it just contained what I do. And then at the end of it, this is a really, really important one. You've got to say what you want to do on your first date. So for me, a first date is something fantastic, just really simple, like going for, a coffee or, just going for a drink. So from memory, I think I had... Well, I think that's actually pretty good, for a first date on a dating app. You don't want to go all guns blazing with a 3-course meal, because imagine being sat opposite somebody and within 10 seconds you think, I don't want to be, sat here, whether it's them for me or me for them. So I think for first date, it's always best to do something like that from a dating app, just to make sure the person's real as well.
James Langton, thank you so much for joining us and giving us those helpful tips if we need them. And the thing that worried me was that I got the impression that it wasn't my boyish good looks that first attracted you to me.
Well, it's cruel for you to make me answer that live on air for everybody else.
I'm disappointed.
I'm going to tell you, it was your personality. I don't know whether you could have captured that in a photograph, Philip, your personality. Am I saying this tactically?
No. You're digging a hole. Anyway, moving on swiftly, are additional costs for businesses going to push up prices for consumers?
With energy costs spiralling for businesses as well as for the rest of us, and business rates remaining high, there are fears that this is going to make inflation on everyday goods even worse than it is now.
Joining us to see whether these fears are well-founded is Nick Lakin, who's the Corporate Affairs Director at Kingfisher, who own brands such as B&Q and Screwfix. Thank you so much for joining us, Nick. So what can consumers expect? Are businesses going to be pushing on higher costs onto consumers this winter?
Well, good morning. I'm speaking here on behalf of an organisation called the Retail Jobs Alliance. So we are a collection of retailers. Besides my business, we're also companies like Claire's Accessories, Greggs, Co-op, Waterstones, British Independent Retailers Association, convenience stores. And business rates, for people who don't know, it's a shops tax. And it was established hundreds of years ago, so before the internet even existed. And the way the system works is that the next increase in business rates comes next April, and it's set on what inflation is doing in September. Now, as you all will have heard, inflation is around 10% at the moment, and it's forecast to go up to 13% later this year. So that means that there's somewhere between a 10 and 13% additional business rates increase that all shops, all retailers across the country will potentially face next April. Now, on top of all the rising prices that I know so many of us are suffering from, this is a major concern. So the major ask we've got at the moment for whoever is the next Prime Minister is to freeze the business rates increase. And I know there's speculation about an emergency budget coming up, and we really hope they'll take that action then. If not, this is an operating cost on retailers, on all shops, and then that will just go straight through to customers.
What did you want? Because people have talked, the two contenders, we'll call them, have talked about VAT, and they've talked about green levies on fuel. They've talked about various things, but they've never talked about this business rates. And I think this is, £1 billion now that will be pushed on to the consumer, because it's not going to disappear into thin air. So how are you going to get government and business working together? Because you were the guys who handed back nearly £4 billion when you didn't need the business rate relief. So you're asking now what for help that you didn't need before and that you handed the money back for?
Well, I'm speaking here on behalf of a whole load of retailers. We represent over about 1 million plus people who work for us. And what we're asking for is that the beauty of the retail sector is there are so many different types of shops and everyone's in very different situations. But speaking myself, if we make money and if we're successful, you do that because you provide great value, great products at great prices. And if so, then obviously if we make money, then we're very happy. I work for a UK listed company, so we're very pleased to pay as many taxes as possible in the UK. The the people in the Conservative election are talking about looking at corporation tax. And the thing about corporation tax and cutting that, that's okay to consider, but ultimately that's at the end of the line. Once you've made your profits, the big piece to look at, particularly in a situation with rising costs, is what do you do about all the operating costs? Because the point about retail is a low margin sector. Shops do not make a lot of money. We're all here to compete for customers. And the more shops you have competing for customers, the more likely you are as a customer to get the best price on the shop floor.
Nick Lakin, thank you very much indeed for joining us today and explaining that. And I wait to see your Freeze the Business Rates campaign, which started here today on GB News.
Yeah, I mean, so because they've also got matches of energy, they have uncapped energy costs. They don't have any cap on. There's no, you know, so it's a massive problem for businesses, and it would be extraordinary if the government spent so much money helping them through the pandemic, only to see them all close after the pandemic because they can't afford their energy bills and business rates. So I think something certainly needs to be done.
Now, at a time when the NHS has huge backlogs, an investigation has revealed today that the Health Service spent over £1 million and took up over 100,000 hours of staff time over the last 3 years on what has been described as woke staff networks.
To tell us more is the investigations campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Elliot, who uncovered these figures, Elliot Keck. Elliot, thank you.
Save pennies, you save the pounds, right?
And that's where I was going to come in on the hours, the 100,000 hours. So let's get this right. So we've gone through a pandemic. Everybody was meant to be, you know, all hands to the pump, as they say. And yet, some of the people working in the NHS has managed to take out 100,000 hours. And that, to me, seems the issue. If people want to go on courses, I don't have a problem with that. I'd say do that in your spare time, of a weekend, after hours, whatever. I don't have a problem what courses go on. But within this organisation, at this period of time, yes, I do.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think, you know, as you say, if people want to do it in their own hours, that's one thing. If you want to do it in their lunch hour, that's another thing. But it does seem that a huge amount of working time, I mean, some networks get a day, a week to run, and I think that is clearly a problem.
And I don't understand the figures either. You know, 100,000. So when you say £1 million, does that not include the 100,000 work hours as well? How do the two figures correlate?
So no, they don't relate. So we haven't attempted to work out the cost of those 100,000 hours. The £1 million is when NHS trusts have said that each network, for example, is able to use has a budget of up to £5,000 per year to do its activities.
So it's not £1 million at all. It's £1 million
plus 100,000 staff hours. Yeah.
100,000 hours that you'd pay people. Wow, that's a massive difference.
Well, exactly, and it's an important thing to clarify. So one network may, for example, get £5,000 a year and may get what's called 0.2 FTE, i.e. a staff member spending 20% of their time on running that network. So the two figures are completely separate, and yeah.
I mean, it's quite extraordinary. I was looking at this one, that there was one university health board held an LGBT picnic with tea and rainbow cake in June. And I was just thinking to myself, how must you feel if you're ringing up for an appointment or something and you can't get through, or you can't get an appointment, or it's been cancelled, knowing that you can't, nobody's answering the phone because they're on a LGBT picnic with rainbow cake. I mean, it is pretty galling for the patients, isn't it, to read about this kind of stuff?
Yeah, and then when you reach them on the phone, they'll probably tell you to cut down on the calories.
The other thing I want to know, these people, is it the managers, is it the nurses, is it the doctors? Who's taking the time off?
We don't know. Well, we simply don't know. I mean, it could be nurses, it could be doctors, or it could be middle managers.
Well, we need to know that as well.
I mean, and have they, just quickly, have they all decided independently to do this in all of these trusts, or is there something from the NHS coming down to them to say you should be doing this kind of stuff?
So I think it's mostly trust making the individual decisions. I mean, it's not something that is prevented by NHS centrally at all. But I think it's mostly individual decisions made by trusts.
Elliot Keck, thank you very much indeed for coming in and sharing this exclusive with us today.
Yes, now that's it for the first hour of the show, but don't go anywhere. We will be back very shortly.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning and welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip. Coming up on this hour of the show,
we'll be discussing Royal Air Force recruitment and diversity targets with the second woman to fly the Tornado GR4 on the front line, Mandy Hickson.
And this week, marked 45 years since the passing of the King of Rock and Roll. We'll be joined by a man often described as Elvis Presley's most devoted fan.
All of that and much more after your latest headlines with Tatiana.
Good morning, it is 11 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. More travel disruption is expected on mainline trains today as union members from 18 train companies walk out. Only 20% of the UK rail network is said to be running, with some parts of the country having no trains running at all. Some train services will also be affected on Sunday by the aftermath of today's strike action. Well, yesterday saw little to no services running on the London Tube, while most buses across west and southwest of the capital were cancelled. P&O Ferries will not face criminal proceedings over its handling in firing almost 800 workers earlier this year. That's according to the Insolvency Service. The firm sparked backlash after it sacked staff without notice in March, replacing them with agency workers. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng asked the Insolvency Agency to carry out an urgent inquiry into whether they had broken the law. There are no outstanding criminal proceedings, but a civil investigation is ongoing. Dockers are due to strike at the port of Felixstowe, the UK's largest container shipping port, tomorrow. The strike, which is over workers' pay, is due to last 8 days. The Felixstowe Dock and Railway Company had offered workers a £500 lump sum on top of a 7% pay rise, but around 1,900 members of the Unite Union have rejected this offer.
The RPI is running now at 12.3%. If you accept 7%, then your standard of living goes down by 5.3%. And as for the £500, it's an insult because if you do your maths and you take away the national insurance increase that the government have foisted upon us and also the income tax, you end up roughly with just over £300.
Former Levelling Up Minister Michael Gove has endorsed Rishi Sunak to be the next Conservative leader. Writing in The Times, he accused Foreign Secretary Liz Truss of taking a holiday from reality over her plans to cut tax to ease the rise of cost of living. The former cabinet minister also said he won't be returning to frontline politics. Meanwhile, the two candidates vying to be Conservative leader have outlined their plans for policing if they were to become the next Prime Minister. Speaking at the GBNews hustings in Manchester last night, Rishi Sunak called for the Justice Secretary to be put in charge of parole boards to prevent political correctness from affecting sentencing decisions. He also gave his support for stop-and-search powers to tackle knife crime. Meanwhile, Liz Truss said officers should be more focused on tackling crime on the streets rather than on social media.
We do need to make sure our police are policing the streets rather than policing Twitter and focusing on the right crimes the public are concerned about. See, what I would do is have league tables that compare police forces and how they are performing so they can really be held to account by the public.
Stop and search is the thing that we know makes an enormous difference. It's actually the powers that we are trialling in other areas in the country that allow the police to stop and search previously convicted knife criminals.
A 23-year-old man has been charged with the abduction and sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl in Greater Manchester. Lewis Jones has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of abduction. He's been remanded in custody and will appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court later today. The victim has since been safely reunited with her family. Weeks of drought in Europe have led to lower than normal water levels in rivers and lakes, but it's also unveiled treasures that have remained hidden for years. Well, in Spain, water levels have reached so low that it's revealed a prehistoric stone circle dubbed the Spanish Stonehenge. It's been hidden since the 1960s as the area was turned into a reservoir. Meanwhile, in Serbia, the river Danube has fallen to one of its lowest levels in almost a century and exposes the hulks of more than 20 German warships that were sunk during the Second World War. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip. We have a fantastic hour of TV and radio lined up for you. Coming up,
this week marked 45 years since the death of Elvis Presley, and we're joined by a man who's been described as his biggest fan to discuss the enduring legacy of the king of rock and roll.
And did you know in France it is the law that all men must wear Speedos to swim in public pools? We'll be discussing that and more bizarre legal stories with Andrew Eborn, who hopefully will be wearing a little bit more Speedos.
And Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has been accused of antagonising cyclists after proposing that speed limits and registration plates should be introduced for them. We'll be seeing what a cycling company makes of his plans.
And keep those views coming in. Email us at gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Well, before all of that, lots of you have been getting in touch. Esther, what have you got?
Have indeed. David here, he says, I'm a charity shop worker. 10 or 12 years ago, we had police officers who'd walk up and down our high street and pop their heads into the shop and asked if everything was OK. Those community police have for years now disappeared. Police no longer respond to shoplifting. The only time you see police in our area now is when they are whizzing past in their cars.
Mark says, good morning, thank you for your programme today. This is another reason why we watch GB News. Thank you, Mark. Keep watching. But there's one here for you, Sean, actually. Peter has written in and said, good morning to you both. Could you answer a question for me, please? If, as it seems, the Mayor of London is not carrying out his role as efficiently as he should, can he himself be removed or taken into special measures? Which, Sean, I'm glad you're back. Can you answer that question for Peter? Can he be taken into special measures?
The unfortunate answer to that is no. I would love for him to be taken into special measures, as would millions of Londoners, but we have to suffer him until the next election, at least.
And we had lots of people as well saying, will you be standing again, or, you know, trying to push you to stand against some of our viewers?
That is entirely up to my wife.
Said the right thing. What's that? What's that? Easy life, happy wife?
Happy wife, happy life. I know it better than anybody, I can tell you.
So newspaper stories, Phil?
Yes. So, Sean, front page of the Eye about this poll that shows that voters want handouts to help with their energy bills, not tax cuts. What do you make of that?
Do you know what this says to me? 2010, and the journey that the Tory party was on to try and rebuild the finances of this country. Then we had an intervention by the Labour Party. And what was important about the Labour Party, they gave the impression that the government is responsible for everything and the government pays for everything. I speak in a lot of schools, and the first thing I say to school is the government has no money, not one single pence. The money is all ours. We raise all that money. And if a government keeps handing out that money, at some point it will not be replenished. So when I see voters ask for handouts, I think what we should have done is educate the public that we should be building tax cuts in, building an efficient economy that gave us that money itself, because the government has no money to give us. It distresses me to see this, because this is emotional economics, not real economics.
But obviously lots of people struggling with their energy bills, they're going to be unaffordable for lots of people. I mean, do you not think that, and even if Liz Truss wins and she's sort of been more focusing on tax cuts than handouts, do you not think that even if she wins, she's going to have to give some money to people to help them with their energy bills over the winter? It's just not politically possible not to.
Well, let's be clear. To give people money, the quickest way is to give them back the money they've earned. And the tax system is a quicker way of giving that money back. And I think it's an important principle to let people keep most, if not all, of the money they earn. Look, there's no doubt that we are in a special position with fuel bills, and things have been done. But if you look at Rishi's approach, I've had someone say to me, his approach is what led us here. We've had 10 years of being here, and he is the Chancellor, and some of that period Liz was not. I prefer Liz's approach because she's talking about letting people have their money. The best place for your money is in your pocket, so you can decide what to do with it, not for a government to spend your money for you.
Now, the story I'm interested in what you think about this one. The story that caught my eye today. I'm a hardliner on crime, as I think you might be, Sean. And I was reading the Daily Mirror, page 29, cracking headline, I might add, which I'll come on to in a second. It's about a brand new police custody unit, hotel custody, they've described it as, where basically they don't call the inmates, they call them customers. And you have room service. Smiling officers wait on them hand and foot. They bring them around hot chocolate on demand. They have a buzzer where they can press a buzzer and they'll ask for whatever they want, chocolate, all the rest of it. And the headline is "Soft Sell," which I think was terrific in the Mirror. But this is extraordinary, in my opinion. They literally have a buzzer in the. They give them a pillow for when they're in there as well. It's like a luxury thing. But they have a buzzer, and the police officers come around and say, "What would you like?" "Oh, I'd like a hot chocolate. I'd like a whatever." And they just come around and bring it with them. And the thing that's extraordinary about it is, it says in here that the aim of this new system, soft system, is to reduce reoffending. Well, I would have thought. I'm not.
We'll all want to be.
I don't know about you, Sean, but it seems the most bizarre approach to reduce reoffending. It seems to me, if anything, everyone's going to think, "Oh, go for a night in that nice custody unit. You get everything you want in there." What this seems crackers to me. What do you make of it?
I hope this has been written up incorrectly.
That's what I was thinking. I hope that it's exaggerated or wrong.
Because there's two lines I take. The first line is, if you're a police officer, you never signed up to deliver people hot chocolate. You signed up to make our community safe. So this will probably be the kind of thing that, for you, end your career early. But the more substantive point is this. If we want people to stop committing crime, we should always treat them with decency, but we should also take that teachable moment. I would prefer a system that said to a person, "How did you get in this position? Can we help you?" You know, if it's a young person, can we help you get back into college, get onto the employment ladder, whatever it is. If it's someone with mental health or with alcohol issues, deal with those issues. Making people beyond comfortable is probably not the best way to do it. And let's be clear, traditionally, the police have always been decent to you. They've always been nice. They don't need to go to another level. The amount of resource and time this is costing, I'd hope we'd put into fighting crime.
Well, I've got to say, of course it's true, Sean, it's in the Daily Mirror. So I think we can safely say that it's definitely...
And I'll move on to the front page of The Times here, and I just thought this was interesting. This was Gove. He's talking about Liz Truss's plans. He's saying she's taking a holiday from reality. You can't just cut taxes. Those people most in need probably aren't even paying taxes, and your pensioners aren't either. But what actually I wanted to focus on is, in this article, he's saying he thinks his front bench career is over, and that he won't really probably be serving on the front line politics again. Now, I thought that was sad, actually, because most people will know he's one of the brightest, sharpest politicians there are. So is this just a little bit of careful planting of a thought there? Is this an advert by him to either Liz or Rishi for a job, or is it genuinely he thinks his life, at the front line of politics is over? What do you think?
I'd say two things. Again, he is definitely one of the sharp tools. He's an effective minister, which can be hard to do. A lot of departments will tame you. You'd have a better idea about this than most. They tame you. He was never tamed. I worked for him in the education department. He pushed things through. If this is an advert, it's a bizarre one, because with Rishi, he could have just rolled in and said, Rishi, well done, let's get this, give me a job. With Liz, he's probably beyond the pale, and I don't think this will change anything.
But by saying that up front, saying, well, I know Liz, she's going to overlook me, I am the best here, I'm just letting everybody know that if I don't get a job, it's because she doesn't like me and I won't go there, but I am one of the best performers. No, it's over for him.
I just don't think he needs to say that. And if he says it's over, I kind of believe him. The one thing I say about Michael Gove, I know he had his issues with Boris, but he's always been quite straight about himself. This is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. Even when he made all the mistakes over COVID, he was one of the few people I've heard say, I made a mistake, I've changed my mind.
Or do you think he's been rattled by Labour going ahead in the polls?
No. I met Michael probably 20 years ago, very long time ago in Hammersmith campaign and stuff. He's been through the ups and downs of the Conservative Party. Labour doing well in the polls wouldn't shake him.
Isn't this just the typical thing? It's like a footballer coming to the end of the career who announces their international retirement when they know the manager's not going to pick them anyway. Is that?
Now, I'd argue that feels a bit more correct to me.
That's what it seems like to me. He knows he's going to be frozen out, so get your announcement in.
If you could suggest I left voluntarily, it's better.
I'm glad to see that you're as cynical as me, Sean. Thank you so much for joining us.
So am I. I was just throwing the options out there.
Thank you so much for joining us again. Great stuff. Now, this week marked 45 years since the passing of Elvis Presley. But the King of Rock and Roll's legacy is still very much alive in 2022, particularly with Baz Luhrmann's latest film bringing the icon back to life on the big screen this summer.
To discuss Elvis's enduring legacy, we're delighted to say we're now joined by one of Presley's most devoted fans, who's been the owner and organiser of the official Elvis Presley fan club of Great Britain for nearly 6 decades. It's Todd Slaughter. Great to have you with us. So why have you devoted so much of your life and time to the King?
Well, why did I do it? I sometimes ask myself that very often. But it's been a lifetime of excitement, really. I initially got involved in 1962 when Telstar was first launched, the first communication satellite, and I thought this would be a great way for Elvis to appear on television. And I took over the Elvis Presley fan club in 1967. So I have been there for 55 years at the helm.
At Telstar, we went to see the movie Elvis, sensational, and it said he did, because he didn't leave America, and he did a big global concert, and they said 1.5 billion people watched Elvis there. And I also read, were you linked in this in one way or another, because you kept wanting him to come to Britain to perform?
I kept barraging the Colonel to do it. There was a TV producer in Britain called Elkin Allen that did Ready, Steady, Go for Rediffusion, and he was really up for this. And he contacted ABC Television, and they sort of sent a contract over to see if it might actually work. But at the time, Elvis Presley was committed to many movies in Hollywood, which was another way that he achieved a global outreach. But of course, it took 10 years for it to happen, and it did. So I'm quite proud of that.
Just, Todd, on Esther mentioned the film, which we thoroughly enjoyed, although I thought the film could have been called Colonel Tom Parker rather than Elvis. It was sort of more about him, and and Tom Hanks did a brilliant job. Do you think that film was accurate in the way it portrayed Elvis and his relationship with Colonel Tom Parker?
It's a fabulous film. It really is. But of course, it's drama, isn't it? And obviously, it's got a lot of urban myths that had previously been, disqualified. But that happens in any biopic anyway. Colonel Parker wasn't the evil man that people now think he probably is. Like every manager, he's the man that makes the money and the man that keeps part of it. But he got Elvis to make more money out of Hollywood than any other screenplay star at the time. And he got the best deal with the record company. So although Elvis took a quarter of it, Colonel Parker took a quarter of it, Elvis had a lot of money.
Just on, we've just, people watching on the telly have just seen the pictures of you with Elvis. And of course, you were one of the, I think I'm right in saying, Todd, that you were one of the last people that's filmed with Elvis before he died in Indianapolis in 1977. I just wondered if you could tell us about your personal meetings with Elvis and what Elvis was, from your perspective as a person.
Well, I'd met quite a lot of stars before meeting Elvis. But to be fair, nothing prepared me for meeting Elvis. Most stars, when you see them, are larger than life when they're off stage. But Elvis was the opposite. He was larger than life on stage, but off stage, he was a mild-mannered, polite guy who I guess, when you meet someone backstage at what was the Las Vegas Hilton, you're probably meeting groups of people 3 or 4 times a day. So you're not prepared when a dozen limeys appear from nowhere and want to shake your hand. But it was a wonderful experience. To meet any star is quite fantastic, but to meet the biggest star of all is just phenomenal. And he was a great guy.
And what have you done to celebrate this sort of 45 years since his passing?
Well, I'm well past my sell-by date. This year I'm 77. I'm 28 years post-heart transplant, so I'm living on the knife edge. I've taken it easy, and I've taken we've got two great guys that are now running the day-to-day work of the fan club. And the fan club is, 40 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there's an awful lot to do. I just do the easy stuff and take care of the social media. But, the film, the movie, has been such a success. And it will have no doubt introduced a lot of young people to the talent that was Elvis Presley. And hopefully that will be sustained over the coming months, because there's not going to be another documentary unless someone makes a documentary about my little book.
just one final thing, Todd, very quickly. I'm intrigued to know, are the majority of the Elvis Presley fan club, are the majority of members men or women?
It's half and half. You would think it would probably be more women, but, show me a man that's never once dreamed of being Elvis Presley and I'll show you a liar,
I can certainly show you a woman who's dreamt of being with Elvis Presley, because she sat right next to him.
I thought he was just incredible. For me, he had everything: style, finesse, he could sing. I just thought he was warm. But you've met him, something I never ever got to do. I want to know why you were drawn to him. What qualities did he have for you?
He came about at a time when I was, just leaving. Well, I'm not going to say just leaving school, because I went to work in 1960. But at that time, I was buying the New Musical Express and Disc and all the pop papers, just to see about what was happening on the music scene. And of course, Elvis was magnetic. So he had an outreach that was almost evangelical. Yet he never came here. So he was always, I think, a curio to lots of people, but his music transcended all of that and influenced everyone's soul, I think. And of course, him being so successful made other artists want to be the same.
Todd Slaughter, thank you very much indeed. See, it was all about the music.
Yeah, not for you, it wasn't. Coming up after the break, it's time for Lawful News with friend of the show, Andrew Eborn, so don't go anywhere.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable, and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Welcome back. We've got loads of your views coming in. Phil, you go first.
David says, as a vulnerable person, I've never stopped wearing a mask when travelling on the tube. It shocks me that so many people are not wearing masks. I do not think it is in any way an infringement on my liberties to wear a mask. People in other countries seem not to have a problem with masks. Typical every man for themselves Britain. There you go, David.
I've got here Alison. Tony Blair calls the NHS issues ridiculous GP contracts to start with. Now we have virtually no service. And Rob, who's a retired surgeon, said the NHS has been running core mandatory training, CMT, for years. I used to despair at having to cancel operating lists and clinics to attend hand-washing training and diversity training. The main reason is to defend against legal action. If a trust is sued for employment issues, for example, the first question the barrister asks is about diversity training. If the answer is no, then you have lost the case. Thank you, Rob.
And Neil says, no hope for me on Tinder. Yours happily single. So you're giving up too easily, Neil. You really are.
But you said happily single. So there you go, happily single.
Maybe. Well, we're now joined in the studio to talk about some bizarre stories this week from the legal world. It's a friend of the show, Andrew E-Born, and I can exclusively reveal he's not wearing Speedos, as Esther feared that you might be.
What do you mean, not just wearing
well,
Speedos? And I don't know how, I don't want to go there, how you know whether he's got Speedos on or not.
Thank you. He told me in bed this morning that
I thank you. It's got to be.
So anyway, what is all this about?
Well, it is strong. We've been sitting at home for 2 years, haven't we, longing for those immortal words, "This is your captain speaking." So we're basically, people are now travelling again, fortunately, if they can get flights and so on and so forth. But the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office has issued a sort of warning, if you like. We've got to be prepared. We've got to be prepared because there are different laws and regulations around the different countries. And some of them are really bizarre, like the Speedos in France. There's high heels in Greece, and you can't wear camouflage in Barbados.
So you can't wear high heels in Greece, or you have to wear high heels?
Well, it depends on where it is. So for that particular one with Greece, what they're saying is round places like the Acropolis and the ancient monuments, you cannot wear high heels because it's damaging the relevant buildings and so on. So it's a logical one. But people, you cannot go strutting around.
Some people say that to guests coming to the house on their wooden floor.
That's right.
No.
Well, exactly, they do, and they do ruin those floors. So they have a law, and you'll be a heavy fine imposed on that sort of basis. But you mentioned Speedos, and it's an extraordinary thing. In France, it's a law dating back to 1903. And what it basically says is that men and boys must wear tight-fitting swimming trunks. They must wear Speedos, as opposed to these sort of baggy things that people wear, the Bermuda shorts that you've got on. So the interesting thing is, and the reason they cite, and they say there's a logical reason for this, apart from the extraordinary look on the beaches, the reason is it's supposed to be more hygienic. Because you're not wearing those Bermudas, which you might do walking around and gathering dust and so on and so forth before you hop in the pool. So that's the reason for that one. But there's a strange one as well. Barbados, I mentioned, and a lot of the places, the Caribbean islands, you're not allowed to wear camouflage clothes. Because that's illegal. It's supposed to be just for the military. A lot of people, if you want to pack those camouflage clothes, it could be quite difficult. It's the great way you talk about...
You're impersonating being a military person.
Exactly. I suppose it's the great way of... You talked about Tinder earlier. It's the great way of saying you want to break up with somebody. You send them camouflage clothes because you don't want to see them anymore.
I mean, are these laws enforced, though?
Oh, absolutely.
They are actually...
They're really enforced. And you can suffer big fines. So some of the monuments, for example, in Italy, if you sit on some of these monuments and you're eating food or drink, you could get a fine. So leave the cornetto behind when you're sitting next to a church or whatever it is.
How are you supposed to know about these? If I'm going to France, how am I expected to know about a 1903 law that says I've got to wear...
Well, Andrew Eborn here every week. But the alternative, what you can do, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and we'll put out the relevant website, you can check the details. They have 200 countries. They update them on the rules, which change all the time, on a regular basis. And so you can have a look at that sort of side. And they had last year, I think it was like 150 million different visits, having a look at the website with those relevant rules, because they are bizarre.
Well, how about the spontaneous dancing?
I love that. In Sweden, come on, that is just superb. It's a rule which has been around since the 30s, where if you suddenly, I know you're tempted, Footloose and all that sort of stuff, as soon as Dancing Queen comes on, fills up there, it's going to be good. But you're not allowed to. If it's spontaneous dancing, they don't have a licence.
Can I tell you, we're now going to be going to Sweden for our holidays forever.
Yeah, sounds terrific.
It's rather fun. But they are wonderfully quirky. Germany, for example, if you're driving along in a car and you run out of petrol on the Autobahn, you get a double penalty, because effectively what's happening, you run out of petrol, there's a humiliation. But it's also illegal to run out of petrol, because they say it's up to you, it's your fault, you shouldn't run out.
I did run out of petrol on the motorway years ago.
Oh, why?
Much to my embarrassment.
And mine now.
Yeah, I've got to admit. But, I mean, there must be a reason for these, like the spontaneous dancing. Something must have happened in Sweden to make them
It absolutely. So that was a moral thing. So when they were looking, although they've said now they want to try and repeal the law, and they voted fairly recently to appeal it, but they haven't done anything about it. It was to do with the morals of the youth and getting people to dance and things like that spontaneously if you didn't have a licence was obviously terribly upsetting and things like that.
Well, I probably do need a licence for my dancing. Andrew, thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure. Nice to see you.
And coming up, we'll be discussing white male recruits not being offered roles in the Royal Air Force. But first, here's the news headlines with Tatiana.
It's 11:32. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The travel disruption continues on mainline trains today as union members from 18 train companies walk out. Only 20% of the UK rail network is said to be running, with some parts of the country having no trains running at all. Some train services will also be affected on Sunday by the knock-on effect of today's action. P&O Ferries will not face criminal proceedings over its handling in firing almost 800 workers earlier this year. That's according to the Insolvency Service. The firm sparked backlash after it sacked staff without notice in March, replacing them with agency workers. There are no outstanding criminal proceedings, but a civil investigation is ongoing. Former Levelling Up Minister Michael Gove has endorsed Rishi Sunak to be the next Conservative leader. Writing in The Times, he accused Foreign Secretary Liz Truss of taking a holiday from reality over her plans to cut tax to ease the rising cost of living. The former Cabinet Minister also said he won't be returning to frontline politics. A 23-year-old man has been charged with the abduction and sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl in Greater Manchester. Lewis Jones has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of abduction. He's been remanded in custody and will appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court later today. The victim has since been safely reunited with her family. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, your views have been coming in thick and fast. Esther, what have you got?
Alan said Michael Gove recommending Rishi Sunak as leader as a sort of part of the course. Michael Gove stabbed Boris in the back in the previous leadership race, so it's to be expected that he's to support another backstabber, Rishi.
Deirdre says, this is for Esther.
Oh.
I just wanted to say how incredible you look, even more so today. There was no need just to pick out Esther, Deirdre. You could have, at least given me some hope that you might have mentioned me. You haven't aged at all, Deirdre says. In fact,
since last week?
In fact, I would go as far as to say you look even younger than when we met 25 plus years ago.
Oh, my.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Wendy says here, I was walking along the Littlestone seafront promenade just half an hour ago thinking I really must get back to tune into Esther and Phil when I was nearly injured by 2 electric cycles that sped past me at high speed. They were a middle-aged husband and wife, and the man was very heavily built, and they were just so reckless. I'm against number plates, etc., but it is not right that they get away with it. There needs to be some middle ground.
And Phil says, I'm 80 years old, living in Cornwall. I cycle perhaps a dozen times a year along the farm tracks and country lanes. Registration plates and insurance is an urban idea. If the urban dwellers want this, it should be local rules restricted to local areas. So anyway, Wendy, Phil, keep watching because we are going to be discussing that idea in a few moments' time. Now, women and ethnic minorities are reportedly being favoured in recruitment drives to meet impossible targets, prompting the head of recruitment at the RAF to resign in protest.
Sources have said that job offers to white male recruits have effectively been paused to meet diversity targets, and the head of the RAF has been accused of compromising the security of the UK to improve diversity within the force.
Well, to discuss the story further, we're now joined by the second woman to fly the Tornado GR4 on the front line, Mandy Hickson. Mandy, thank you so much for joining us. We're delighted to have you. What do you make of all this, these diversity targets and the RAF pausing the recruitment of white men in order to hit them?
Well, firstly, it's lovely to join you both, and thanks for inviting me on. I think it's a really interesting one. I think you can look at this in 2 ways. Firstly, it's really essential that we don't change the operational effectiveness. That's the thing that's absolutely paramount. But, women were first allowed to join the Air Force as pilots in the early 1990s. So we've been sort of flying for 30 years, and yet they're still incredibly underrepresented. So actually something has got to change. Something has got to be done a little bit differently. Now, you can't discriminate, obviously, against any gender or any race because that would go against the Equalities Act. But I do think what they are trying to do is just to create a more representative society of what is going on in the outside of the Air Force.
Mandy, I think most of our viewers would say, well, look, I don't really care whether the pilot's male or female or black or white or whatever sexuality they are. We just want the best person, just recruit the best person for the job. Is that not what the RAF should be doing? Just let's get the best person, whatever they are.
Well, of course, that is what they're trying to do, Philip. I mean, you always want the best people for the job. But I think when you actually look at it, and if you look around and it's still 95, 90% male white men, then actually I think it is important that there has to be something that's done just to increase that diversity, with it being ethnic minorities and also with women as well. You are going to still get the best people for the job because these positions are so in demand. It's really, really competitive to get to the front line and to actually get into these roles. So it's not like you're going to be lowering the standards at all. So, that is the other side to look at it, that the operational effectiveness, the standards are still going to be the same, but you're just trying to increase a push. They're not stopping it, but they are just, they've fallen short of their figures that they were looking at this year. And some of them, when I have looked at them, I think, 40% by 2040 is a really big target. So, I do think those are very, very challenging targets that they're going to be trying to meet.
But Mandy, I want to talk about your journey. You've been in aviation now, if I can hardly believe the number of years. It says 30 years experience here. You've done 3 tours of duty, 45 missions of Iraq. So how did you get in? Did somebody lower the bar for you?
Well, it's quite an interesting one, actually, Esther. So when I was first looking at joining as a pilot, women weren't allowed to be pilots in the Air Force. And so I continued along that journey, though, through Air Cadets, through the University Air Squadron. And then in my second year at university, they changed the rules, allowing women to join. I then applied to join, and actually I then went on and failed all the tests. So I'm about to sort of go against what we're sort of saying here. But at that time, I'd been proving myself to be a very, very capable pilot on the University Air Squadron. So I'd passed all the course. I'd basically graduated almost at the top of my cadre. And so the boss of that University Air Squadron looked at the system and said, hold on a minute, why is it so many women were failing these tests? And they really looked into it. And I think there was an unconscious bias that existed in those early 1990s when they looked at the testing system and they found out that a huge proportion of women were failing these tests compared to men. And they'd only been basically designed, tested and ever used on men in the past. And so actually what they did was they ended up taking me on as a test case, really, to see if the tests were flawed. And they went on and they did change the tests. And I just see that as being really progressive from the Air Force. They didn't just sit there. They didn't just say, no, we've got a test in place that should work for everyone. They realized that things were changing. They wanted to recruit women. Women were coming in, highly capable, just as effective as men, and yet the majority were still failing. So they went on, they did change something. So they have always been, I think, very proactive.
45 missions over Iraq. What do you think then the qualities, irrespective, of whether you're getting greater diversity, what do you need? Because otherwise it's the wrong job for you, surely.
You have got to be a quick decision maker. You've got to have a really good situational awareness. I always say really good hand-to-eye coordination is really, really important as well. I've flown cadets for many, many years, and you can often see the youngsters as you fly with them, those that have got those skills really from the outset of their careers, compared to those that don't. It's also really important to have good communication skills, be a good team player, be happy to be a leader as well, and be held accountable for those leadership skills as well and the decisions that you make. And I think just being able to step up and basically step up and actually want to serve your country as well.
And Mandy, just very quickly, there's 2 very interesting articles in the Daily Mail today. One from Andrew Neil, who's written an essay which is about how Britain is in the grip of a new dogma that prizes diversity above talent. But then about 10 pages further on, there's an investigation by Guy Adams into the Red Arrows. And in that, it says that 3 people have been suspended, and this investigation reveals the boozy training exercises, the alleged adultery and toxic culture that have left the top brass seething. I just wondered whether or not that sort of, what you might call sort of macho male kind of culture in the RAF was something that you experienced when you were there, or whether that's not typical.
I think it was part of it, actually. Yes, I'm joking. I think we've actually seen a massive transition over the last 30 years, really, I think as well, since women have been serving in the Air Force at a much sort of greater numbers. But I think we have seen that change, and it's changed massively from when I joined, when I think there was a sort of very much ego, there was very much the alpha male that was serving on the front line. And I think what we saw is that steady change. And I think hopefully we've gone away from the very, very boozy culture that did used to exist, where it was all part of the everyday routine almost of hit happy hour and then have a few drinks. And we're certainly not seeing that. You know, when we look at the people that are joining nowadays, they're really into their health and fitness. We've seen the meals changing from, you know, protein based. They're now wanting their shakes. You know, we've gone away from the full fry. So I think we are getting a very, very different group of individuals that are wanting to join and wanting to serve these days.
Mandy Hickson, thank you so much indeed for joining us today and sharing your experiences. Thank you very much.
Coming up, we'll be talking about a proposed shake-up from the Transport Secretary, which could see cyclists displaying registration plates in the UK. Don't go away.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Cycling groups in the UK have accused Transport Secretary Grant Shapps of proposing expensive barriers to cycling after suggestions that cyclists should display registration plates and buy insurance.
Speaking to the Daily Mail, Mr Shapps also said that he proposed extending speed limit restrictions to cyclists.
Well, to discuss the story further, we're now joined by the Director of Pennine Cycles in Bradford, Sandra Corcoran. Sandra, thank you so much for joining us. What do you and your customers make of Grant Shapps' intervention here, saying that you should all have insurance and abide by speed limits and have registration plates?
Morning, Philip and Esther. Yes, it seems a ridiculous idea, and that's what our customers are coming in and saying, that the majority of cyclists, adult cyclists, are car drivers and own cars anyway. So they just think it's unworkable as well, and having a big registration plate on the back of your cycle adds more weight and instability, I would think. I'm not the best at balancing, but I need to have my wits about me when I'm riding my bicycle. I don't know about you, especially with the hills around in Yorkshire. I'm not sure that many of us hit the 20 miles per limit speed limit anyway.
Maybe when you're going downhill, Sandra, you might do. I mean, we've had quite a few of our viewers contacting us to say, look, you know, these cyclists, they go around, they're going through red lights, they're sort of going around like maniacs. Surely there should be some way of being able to prosecute cyclists who ride dangerously and put pedestrians at risk. What would you say to that?
Well, I'm not sure there are that many that'll go through red lights. I drive as well, and I'm out there, and when I'm at traffic lights, I mean, sometimes drivers, and I'm sure I'm guilty, and you probably are, and I would admit that sometimes you just get to the light and you just throw and it just changes. And I'm sure that happens with cyclists. Cyclists are really aware of what's going on. You know, you're more vulnerable when you're on a bicycle. You haven't got the protection of the metal around you. So cyclists are looking all the time. You're alert. You're looking at traffic, looking at pedestrians. You're looking at dogs. Dogs certainly seem to like cyclist legs. So you've got to be, be very aware. It's, you're very vulnerable out there as a cyclist. So I'm not sure what the evidence is of these cyclists who are always accused. People always say that to me. Are cyclists allowed to go through traffic lights at red? I'm not sure that many people do that.
But I think there feels to be... There definitely seems to be more cyclists on the road, and I think it's how do you share that space better? Because frequently in London and in other cities, as a pedestrian, you feel more vulnerable. So I guess it's about accountability now that there's more cyclists. I mean, should they be paying road tax if they're on the road and they're now getting new lanes built for them?
Well, I think the cycle lanes, certainly the ones in Bradford, they're very dangerous, Esther. You know, I personally wouldn't go on the ones that are in Bradford that I know of particularly. Some of them are very narrow, and you're in the gutter, so you're in the grates. They're not very safe. They're not swept and kept tidy. So it is still a big issue that the cycle lanes in this country are not that safe and are not like the ones in some European cities. I know the one in London by the Thames, that looks nice and wide. I was once in a taxi going to the Houses of Parliament to an event, and the taxi driver was playing heck about, there's no cyclists on this lane. I daren't say to him, well, I have a bicycle shop. He was so, sort of anti-cyclist. And I think, unfortunately, like you say, we've got to share the road, and that's with everybody. And it's being aware that cyclists are just, somebody's mother, father, son, daughter, cousin, a friend of yours. They are, somebody out there, another human being, not just a cyclist, as they seem to be found to be.
Sandra, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We wish your shop continued success, and thank you for making the time to speak to us. All the very best. And
we've got lots more people getting in touch as well, Phil.
We have, and I've got to say that, since when the Tour de France came to Yorkshire, it had a massive boost to cycling in Yorkshire. Lots of views here. John says, Sean Bailey's wife shouldn't worry about him standing for London Mayor next year. I'm convinced Boris Johnson will stand against Sadiq Khan and win again.
It goes, Phil, I'm 80 years old, living in Cornwall. I cycle. Have you done this one? We've done that. I want to go back to a cyclist. Apologies. Give us another one. I'll do this one. Halson, Blair, more blah, 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 or Blair, Blair, Blair. Doesn't like the sound of him coming forward with the rules about mandatory mask wearing and vaccinations for over 18s.
Lots of people contacting about the RAF. Glenn says the RAF should operate a policy of meritocracy. They try the diversity thing in the police and look at the state of the police force now. And Denny says, I'm sorry, but I can't believe that the RAF are going woke. They need people to fight when asked.
That's exactly right. So keep your views coming in a lot there on the bikes and on the RAF. But now it's time to take a look at the week's showbiz and sports news. And in the studio, we're joined by our regular showbiz correspondent, Hayley Palmer, and sports broadcaster, Aidan McGee. Welcome to you both. Are you keen cyclists?
I'm not, no, they really annoy me, actually. They do. I mean, driving through central London, I used to drive in Manchester a lot. I mean, they almost operate in a lawless society of their own, and you go to somewhere busy in central London, like Islington, you go there at like 7 in the morning, you're at the traffic lights, it's almost like the peloton at the Tour de France. And there's the things about, going through the red lights as well. It happens all the time.
And this is what sort of viewers are saying. That's why they're saying they need to be accountable, is what people are saying. So pay tax, know who they are, have them sort of...
If they cause an accident, how on earth do I identify them to say, look, that person cycled across the road?
Has anyone got a soapbox? I think Aidan's got something he wants to say. Why not tell us about the boxing tonight?
True. Yeah, I've got my soapbox about that. Yeah, huge fight tonight in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Hugely controversial that it's there. However, once we get beyond that, it should be a great fight. We've got Anthony Joshua against Alexander Usyk for a heavyweight title. It's the second one. They fought last September. Usyk dominated him, I have to say. Joshua goes into the fight 22 pounds heavier this evening. It looks like a big giveaway, but this Ukrainian guy is just so skilled and he's so adept at what he does. He's got a wonderful movement around the ring. He's built like granite as well. Anthony Joshua is going to have to get in there early and impose his size and his frame on him if he's going to have any chance of winning, because I think it's going to be quite a one-sided bout.
But you think Usyk's going to win?
I think Usyk will win in the 8th round, and I'm Mystic McGee, so I usually get it.
16-1, that is, by the way.
Is it really?
We'll be watching. We'll text you later.
Are you a boxing fan?
Cycling and boxing aren't my thing.
No.
However, showbiz is my thing.
Your showbiz, showbiz is your... So what's happening in your thing?
Well, I've got to talk about the Strictly lineup, because what a lineup we've got. Matt Goss is going to be on Strictly this year. I mean,
the thing is with these things, it's supposed to be celebrities, and I think it probably says more about me than it does about them, but I haven't heard half of them.
Well, I have to say, when I saw the lineup, half of them, I wasn't sure. But you've got to give them a chance with it, because sometimes their personalities grow on you, and, you know, it's a journey, isn't it? But I have to say, I love Fleur-Reese, but she's already an amazing dancer. Is that fair? We want to see someone like you or anything.
You certainly don't want to see me.
Well, how do you know?
You would be good on.
Obvious.
You'd be good on Strictly, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
you do like dancing, don't you? Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
So we'll break the rule if I go on. But yeah, watch this space. But yeah, we've got Kay Adams from Lucerman, Kim Marsh, Tony Adams, of course. I think he could be an interesting one.
Yeah.
Tony Adams was filmed dancing about 3 years ago. He was coaching Granada in Spain.
I remember that.
He was doing all this.
Yeah.
Training. He was actually a well-known training.
It was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't know about good. I don't know. The team ended up bottom of the league.
That was good for Philip, that. See that? That was good for Philip.
Yeah, that's about my limit. The story I was interested in was this, I thought it was quite an extraordinary story, of Vogue Williams going crackers because a passenger on a plane wouldn't move for her.
Yes.
To sit with the rest of her family.
But she booked the wrong seat. However, I do think it's the way you say it, isn't it? If you say, oh, excuse me, would you mind just moving because I want to sit next to my family? But we don't know the way she said it. So I kind of understand that, of course, she wants to sit with her kids. But also, did she just assume that the person should move? But this guy apparently went, no, I'm not moving.
Would you move out of your seat for something? If somebody said, "Oh, do you
Yeah,
mind?"
because I'm a nice, kind person, Philip.
I also think the other thing is, 2 kids sitting next to me for the entire flight, I kind of think, no, I don't think I do want to sit there, have the mother next to them.
All right, all right. You're a nice, kind person, Hayley. Aidan, would you move if somebody asked you to?
I'd probably say, would you like my seat? And if they said yes, I'd say, well, I'm getting off in about 20 minutes. No, of course I give my seat up. Yeah, I did it the other day on the tube.
It was quite strange.
That's not the same as a flight.
Well, it depends how long the flight is, and depends where the new seat's going to be. But I would give it some thought. I promise.
Get back to me later. Is that what you're saying? Get back to me later. I'll give it some thought.
Another story I thought was interesting this week is Coldplay. Chris Martin. He was singing at Wembley, and he said halfway through, "Can we all just stop and just put your phones down and just listen and just be present in the moment?" Which I think's amazing, because let's be honest, we're all on our phones, all doing social media, and sometimes you just kind of need to stop and just experience that. I mean, people pay a lot of money for those tickets. I think it's nice to have something exclusive, which isn't like being leaked to social media.
But if they've paid a lot of money, surely the paying customer, if they want to do that, shouldn't they be able to? Well,
they can do both, can't they?
Is it? I don't know if it's I don't know if there's some kind of licensing issue in terms of whether.
Maybe that's what he was thinking.
I don't like it.
He's thinking,
copyright.
buy my CD, don't film this and keep it forever.
That's what it's about.
There could be a copyright issue maybe about it, but I don't know. I think the customer's always right, aren't they?
Except for what I understand about him, he is somebody who sort of meditates. He's saying in the moment. He's saying enjoy what we're doing, rather than, as you say, living life vicariously. You're at this, watching me. Please not to take in photos, but we're all guilty of it, aren't we?
Of course.
You go and see your favourite person. You want a memory. You want to have that so you can show all your friends forever that you were there.
You look at like Band-Aid or Live Aid in the mid-80s, and no one's got a phone at all, and the setting definitely doesn't.
Because they didn't have a phone. That's
why.
I
know that.
I mean, it was quite dramatic. He stopped halfway through the song, so he was obviously a little bit annoyed about it.
Yeah.
But we are 2022. And we are on our phones a lot.
Hayley, Aidan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We'll see your prediction later, how it goes.
Message me later, yeah?
Well, that's it from us today, but we'll be back next Saturday from 10 a.m. Now, though, it's time for Alistair Stewart and Friends.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Clearing skies for many overnight, but there'll be further wind and rain in the northwest by dawn, and there'll be further showers to come in many spots on Saturday. So a much more changeable weekend compared with the heatwave of last weekend. Weather systems are moving in from the Atlantic, and there's one that is expected to turn up during the early hours of Saturday for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Ahead of that, clear spells for many, 1 or 2 showers still affecting western coasts and hills. But really it's around 2 or 3 in the morning that we'll see some heavy rain and strong winds across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Coastal gales for the Western Isles. Temperatures holding up at 11 to 13 Celsius here, with single figures across parts of northeast Scotland and some sheltered spots of central and eastern England. Some sunshine in the southeast first thing, showers developing elsewhere, and actually the wind and rain towards the northwest sweeps across the rest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushing into northern England by the end of the afternoon as a narrow but quite lively feature. Strong winds, odd rumble of thunder, heavy rain. To the south, 1 or 2 showers, but sunny spells are also expected. Breezy, so it'll feel quite cool, but still the potential for mid-20s in the southeast. High teens, low 20s elsewhere, and as we go into Saturday night, it looks like the showers will mostly ease, but still a few lingering across parts of Wales, as well as central and northern Scotland. Away from the showers, again, temperatures in some sheltered spots dipping into the single figures. So a fresh start on Sunday, but a bright start for many. Plenty of sunny spells for central and eastern, as well as northern parts of the country. The cloud will build towards the west and southwest, and we'll see some persistent rain pushing into North Wales, the North Midlands, as well as Cornwall later in the day. That rain then spreads across the country on Monday, turning to showers later.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for